Greetings one and all, and welcome to the Emporium of Elements. Now, the formula for water, earth, fire, and air is a tried and tested trope, a staple of the elemental magic genre. But like all tropes, success can bring stagnation, and unoriginality often rears its ugly head. We've talked before about ways you can avoid the common pitfalls in writing the four elements, but there is one other approach that I didn't mention, and that is, what if you just replaced the elements? In some works, rather than keeping the standard cast of elements, the four will be swapped out for replacements that tend to bear some resemblance to the original. Elements which maintain that hot, watery, sky, or earthly dynamic, sometimes even keeping the classic red, blue, yellow, and green color scheme. Ice for water is probably the most recognized of this idea, but then why? Why go to the effort of swapping them for just pure lookalikes? After all, the classical elements are beloved. Their core dynamic is extraordinarily charming, and from a literary point of view, it's a magic system that links itself extremely well to building out fantasy works with simple magic systems, or for ones which want to explore good team dynamics. And as if adding to its list of positivity, it's a relatively easy magic system to write. The most notable pitfall really is just the fact that there's a common issue with adaptation being original, or rather unoriginal. Ends on a negative. I take it that this idea of replacing the four elements stems to amend the problem of originality. Well, not quite. Now, the decision to change the elements can purely stem from a desire to be unique, or just to align with your own personal tastes. In Hercules, the Titan of Water, Hydros, is depicted as an ice elemental for no real deeper meaning other than aesthetics, giving water some method of a physical form. This is also seen in Baldur's Gate 3, where ice and lightning are frequently swapped in for water and air-based elemental attacks, and again, this is just for aesthetics, or for gameplay, where it suits it there. However, in both of those examples, they're just adding on to the original element. What we're discussing is total replacement. Just to be blunt immediately, this does not fix the flaw of originality in writing the four elements. If your goal is to be unique, then simply substituting the elements out for new ones, without any extra consideration, that will come across as shallow. And that's at best, lazy at worst. Crane, is your intention just to prattle away for the entirety of the video, or do you actually have an explanation coming up as to why we're discussing this particular topic? Because the goal of replacing the four elements is not so shallow as just to be unique for unique's sake. There is some benefits to it. Now, swapping the elements out can have two notable upsides that may actually encourage you to favor them over the originals. Firstly is the meta point of view. Having different elements may actually suit your story's visual style, or writing style, better than if you were to use water, air, or earth. Looking at air for an example, it's a difficult enough element to visualize, hence why many video games, when creating air elementals, rely on creatures of flight to communicate winds, as opposed to actually making them from the element itself, like you may see with fire, earth, and water. Electricity and light, however, two common replacements for air, are a lot more visual. They're easier to depict, and thus, from a meta point of view, will be easier to incorporate into a given character design. Well, I suppose that does explain why Pokemon's flying type is the way that it is. But meta is only one part of the equation. I presume your second point is about thematics? Such a clever spirit, managed to read the script and all before answering. Look, though the elements that usually replace water, earth, and air, will share some symbolism, that is not to say that they're just one-to-one copies occupying different skins. Ice and water, despite just being different states of matter of the same substance, have vastly different symbolism, hence their tendency to exist independently of each other in various magic systems. But why would you full-on replace water with ice? Well, look into Ninjago, of all examples. Zane is an ice elemental, occupying the role that water normally would take in the quartet. But Zane is not just characterized like your typical waterbender. The series uses his ice symbolism to help showcase how Zane feels robotic and cold to those around him, his element helping explain what type of character he is. Water tends to have a connection with community, whereas ice fits more cleanly with a character that's something of a stoic misfit. Another example can be found in the Owl House. Ice once again replaces water, yet here, The purpose of ice is not just to showcase Luce being some closed-off individual, rather, it's used to show her the wonder of wild magic. The symbolism of ice and snow as things of an elegant beauty, having a regality to them, isn't really a trait of water. This focus on the majesty of ice ties in especially well to the wider themes of appreciating the abnormal and weird. This is the focus of the Owl House, after all. So, if you do run into that desire or decision to replace an element, consider doing so because it aids your story. Now, it can just work for visuals, especially if it's in the background. See, Hydros or the Baldur's Gate 3 Air Elemental. But if in the foreground, use the traits and themes of these swapped elements to your advantage. Don't just have them be reskinned members of the original set. Perhaps the elegance of nature works better in your story than the roughness of earth. Maybe lightning is more visible for your considerations than what air would be. And does ice or water have to be the default state? Whether it's keeping the original set or swapping in new elements, whatever suits your story best, work with it. Whatever element you choose, play with its meaning. Don't just have it be the original element but occupying a new suit. Yes, that's all well and good, Mr. Crane, but your neglect of mentioning fire has not gone unnoticed. Come again? Well, in your discussion, you mention earth, water, and air aplenty, but no regard for fire, at least none I can see. Ah, right. That, I must admit, was no accident. Look, earth, air, and water may be frequently swapped for alternatives, but their companion in fire is rare to such treatment. The stories I have seen, which do replace fire in the main cast of 4, such as Gormiti, maintain fire as an element of prominence, usually occupying the role of being an antagonist. I dug deep for this, and the closest example I could find to actually replacing fire in some meaningful capacity was in Series 19 of the Beast Quest books, who replaced earth, air, and fire for stone, poison, and bone. Now, this is actually a pretty clever idea, but it also isn't a great example. Strider, the Dragon of Bone, is still a being of fire, and throughout his Spotlight book, utilizes it consistently as his primary elemental attack. So, why is this the case? Well, two possibilities. Firstly is the meta and symbolic aspect of fire. The element has the advantage of this inherent cool factor, and one which poses an immense danger to all who face it. A whole host of descriptors for one thing, and a plethora of pre-built themes and myths and usages and associations we can attach, arguably more than the other three. This thing is loaded with popular uses. But the second reason is a bit more bizarre. There just simply isn't a good replacement for fire. Now, there are some examples you could maybe think of. Steam, lava, metal, or electricity, from a quick brainstorm, could fit the bill, but they fall out at a few angles. Electricity, as we mentioned, is a frequent substitute for air. Lava and metal are often more tied to earth. And though steam isn't really that common as a form of elemental magic, it would definitely have a better association with water, as I'm no doubt sure you can see why. Though, one must admit, the prospect of a steampunk story that utilizes fire, steam, metal, and electricity as its core elemental magic force, well, that does sound enticing, doesn't it? Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. Though, back to the point. Simply put, there's just too few examples I can use to actually articulate how you would go about replacing fire. Truthfully, it's less so we can't write elemental stories without fire, but it seems to be the case we just don't want to. Thank you so much for watching. This is an observation I don't think anyone else on the internet has made. I could be wrong in that, but I like to think it's an original thought. Who knows? I don't really go looking up other YouTube videos when I'm researching this because I want to form my own opinions. But yeah, I was surprised. Fire doesn't really have a logical replacement. But what would you... So, I'm curious, what would you guys replace fire with if you were to swap it out in an elemental magic system? Or do you agree with the consensus that maybe we just shouldn't touch fire because there's no real good reason to? Also, what do you think of that steampunk idea for an elemental magic? I really recommend anyone who can turn that into an idea, use it, please. Just tag me when you're done with it. So yeah, socials obviously linked down below. I also have set up Ko-fi, so if you are generous, I fully appreciate it. Obviously you don't have to, there's no necessity for that. But otherwise, hopefully we'll come back to form with next video. Maybe it'll be about water, but more likely it'll be about the fifth element. No promises though. Otherwise, from us here at the Emporium of Elements, I bid you all a fond farewell until I see you next.